Good day, goeiedag allemaal. My name is Paul Rencken, and today Constanze and myself thought it might be a good time to talk about governing bodies and serving on governing bodies. We've both served for more than 16 years, and considering elections are taking place in March 2024, we thought it might be a good time to just ask each other a few questions and chat about our experiences that we've had. Constanze, you've served a number of years, as I mentioned, on governing bodies. What did you gain in your experience, and what can you share with us? What did you learn during your time as a governor on a governing body?
Ja, dankie. Ja, is 'n goeie vraag. Nou dat mens nie meer op 'n beheerliggaam dien nie, ek het nogals baie daaroor gedink, want mens mis die skool. Want as mens raak baie lief vir die skoolomgewing en die mense, jou harte sal altyd by daai skool bly waar jy gedien het, en as jy natuurlik sien hoe die skool vaar in die eksamens en so aan, dan dink jy aan jou tyd terug, en dan wonder jy, wat het jy nou eintlik reg gekry? En ek dink baie belangrik is om te verstaan dat ouers kyk anders na skole as die onderwysers by die skool. Dis hoekom die skolewet so goed geskryf is, dat ouers altyd een meer op die beheerliggaam is, want hulle bring 'n visie en 'n strategie na die skool toe, wat anderster lyk as die aflewering van byvoorbeeld die akademiese vereistes, of soos ons in Engels sê, die delivery of the academics. En dis baie belangrik, want ouers het daai onvervreembare reg om seggenskap te hê in hulle kinders se onderwys. En hulle wil natuurlik die beste vir hulle kinders hê. En hulle gaan met daai idee na die beheerliggaam toe. En nou is die vraag natuurlik, wat is daai beste vir my kind? En die eerste ding wat onmiddellik moet verander is, jy gaan nie beheerliggaam toe vir jou eie kind nie, jy gaan na die beheerliggaam toe om te dien, die hele gemeenskap te dien, al die kinders in die skool te help en hulle belang uiteindelik te verseker in terme van hoe die skool werk. Mens moet die impak gaan verreken van jou dien op die beheerliggaam, jou dienende leierskap. Wat 'n verskil maak dit? En miskien het jy daaroor 'n paar idees.
I think you don't see the impact immediately. You sort of wonder at the time, all the time and the effort and the hours that you put in, because serving on a governing body is not a short-term step to take, but it's hugely rewarding. You see it in your community, you see it years later in the community. I've no longer served on a governing body in the community that I live for 3 years, and I can still see the impact coming through on how the schools have operated and the processes that are in place. I have to say, my daughters and my son always say, "Dad, why do things happen when they've left the school already?" And I think because you protect your children at school, you don't want to work in their interest, you end up putting things in place that are really long-term and really rewarding from that side. And then the other thing is, you see the difference in the community. You see an effort where school is well run, the community is well run, and vice versa. I don't know which comes first, but you do see that there's an impact of well run schools, and the result from that is well run communities. Maybe I must ask you a question. What's the hardest thing when you first got involved in a governing body? Think back a few years when you first got involved and you were there sitting probably suddenly as the chairperson. What were your thoughts at that stage, and what are your thoughts now afterwards, after being involved?
Ja, wel, ek het nie as die chairperson begin nie, so dit was sleg. In die sin, as 'n agterbanker, om dit nou maar so uit te druk, moet jy eintlik maar jou mond gehou het en geluister het wat doen die mense daar, die hoof van die uitvoerende komitee, wat op 'n manier sleg is, maar op 'n ander manier is dit die manier hoe jy leer. Soos wat jy vorder en miskien uiteindelik in 'n spesifieke portefeulje gaan werk, of miskien op die uitvoerende komitee land, of selfs die voorsitter word dan, of in 'n posisie 'n tesourier of 'n sekretaris, dan begin jou invloed eintlik bietjie wyer uitkring. Maar ek dink beheerliggaamslede moet seker maak van die begin af, wat is jou rede om op die beheerliggaam te dien? Gaan dit oor jouself, of gaan dit oor die skool, en gaan dit oor die gemeenskap? En as jy vir jou daai uitgewerk het, dat jy eintlik soontoe gaan, want jou hart is baie vars vir die skool, jy gaan 'n verskil maak om die skool te verbeter en kinders se belewenis van 'n skoolervaring in 'n positiewe lig te verbeter, dan is dit die regte gesindheid. En ek dink dit is wat ek, miskien soos hulle sê, at hindsight, of as mens terugkyk, kan sien, is om te sien dat die besluite wat met daai tipe gesindheid geneem is die besluite wat gebly het. As jy 'n verskuilde agenda het, of jou eie belang wil bevorder by 'n beheerliggaam, dan gaan jy tweede kom. En ja, dit is moeilik om eers in die ding in te kom, want 'n mens vat 'n hele tydjie om te verstaan hoe werk 'n skool, as jy nog nooit op 'n beheerliggaam gedien het nie, nie, is dit 'n baie vreemde plek en jy sien die hoof roel eintlik. En dit kan 'n mens regtig, wil ek amper die woord gebruik, irriteer, maar jy moenie daaroor ongelukkig voel nie, want dit is die hoof se plek om te bestuur. Ons as beheerliggaamslede moet eintlik die skoolhoof help en die bestuurspan help om die skool 'n beter omgewing te maak. En dis miskien aan die einde van jou termyn wat jy verstaan, is dat jy eintlik daai rol speel om die omgewing van die skool te verbeter, sodat al die prosesse baie goed vaartbelyn binne die skool kan gebeur, en dit het 'n impak op die kind se skoolervaring.
That reminds me, a good friend of mine phoned me and said, okay, so you're on this governing body now, and he saw that I'd been elected. He said, what do you do? And in hindsight, the answer is we don't do much now, but we think, we plan, we strategize. And most importantly, what you say there is support. I think I was very fortunate that I worked really well with both principals or three principals that I served with. And you realize that your support function is equally important as any other policy direction or promotion. But maybe I must ask you, why did you serve on a governing body, and why would you suggest people to serve on a governing body? What do you get out of it? I mean, we know you're not paid for it. You're not allowed to be paid for it. We know you spend a lot of time in the process. Why don't you just leave it up to someone else to do?
Ja, ek dink dis ook 'n goeie vraag. 'n Mens moet maar besluit, hoe voel jy? Waar wil jy jou tyd en jou liefde vir 'n saak gaan uitleef? Ons is almal gemeenskapgedrewe mense, en waar 'n gemeenskap eienaarskap neem van 'n skool. Onthou, ons het nie staatsskole in Suid-Afrika nie. Ons het slegs onafhanklike skole en openbare skole. En daai openbare skole behoort eintlik aan die gemeenskap. So die gemeenskap moet 'n seggenskap hê, en hoe anderster as deur hulle ouers. En dan eintlik kom jou liefde vir 'n gemeenskap na vore, jou liefde vir kinders. Ons het almal 'n geweldige belang by goeie onderwys in die land, want dit is wat die land uiteindelik sal vorentoe neem. Ons is nou in 'n baie moeilike situasie in ons land, en ons weet dat die impak wat skole het is baie groot. Daarom is dit belangrik om skole as eilande van uitnemendheid te ontwikkel, maar nie alleen nie. Hulle moet saamwerk met die gemeenskap, en dit is die geheim daarvan. So ek dink 'n mens kan jou uitleef as 'n persoon wat lief is vir die gemeenskap, as jy lief is vir mense. Jy kry wonderlike mense by skole, maar jy moet ook prosesse kan dryf, en om iets te verbeter is altyd 'n baie goeie ding om te wil doen, maar jy moet die regte redes daarvoor hê. Nou, as ek jou miskien kan vra, benewens die tyd wat jy insit, en wat regtig waar partykeer ure aan een is, dae, maande, jare, wat jy op jou eie tyd daar werk, behalwe vir die tyd wat jy ingee, en die kundigheid wat jy na vore bring, wat is die belangrikste werk van 'n beheerliggaam? Veral as mense 'n bietjie gaan kyk na die skool opset, en die personeel van die skool, wat is die belangrikste werk daar?
Well, I think the most important thing that governing body members or prospective governing body members need to understand is that your work is essentially outside the curriculum. So it's in a support function, and I mentioned that before, mentioned that in previous discussions. It's in support function, it's in creating policies, it's in helping your management team get the direction and get to the solutions that the strategy has put in place. Maybe an easy way to answer is what it's not. And I know that's not always the right way of saying it, but it's not to hire and fire educators. It's not to decide which children are going to be in which classroom, for example. It's not to decide who are going to be the head prefects next year or who's going to be the sports captain. That's the domain of the management team. So it's really to set a platform and a support base. And not just a support base as in a shoulder to lean on, but a support base as far as the strategy goes, as far as the policy goes, as far as the process goes. And then to hold management accountable for that. And yeah, I had some tough discussions every now and again with management through the principal, and I always say that very directly, always with the principal involved, but said, look, things aren't right here. You know, there's a problem here. This is what we agreed. It's not happening. What's the problem? Why have we got this problem? So I think support would probably be the biggest single answer that I'll put in place, but also to make sure that there's compliance to procedures. Policies, either the own school policies or the departmental policies that need to be adhered with, to make sure that those are actually maintained and actually run and handled in the way that they should be handled, and make sure that they're complied regularly and on time. Then I suppose the other big thing that we always talk about is finances. And finances is always the difficult subject. It always has been the difficult subject. I think it always will be a difficult subject. But to ensure that the finances that come into the school from the parents are spent for the benefit of the school, and really for the benefit of the school. You and I can probably talk hours and hours about astroturfs and all fancy things, and I'm not knocking astroturfs, but I think one needs to be very sensitive in where you spend your money, where you spend the parents' money, because the parents haven't trusted you in that money. So that custodianship of money, and at times it's a lot of money, you really got to be careful of and handle it from that side. Maybe the last question I want to just ask now is what was the hardest thing that you had to deal with? Let's not go into detail, we won't mention names, but what was the toughest time that you had on a governing body, serving as either chairperson or as a member of a governing body?
Ja, dis 'n baie moeilike vraag om te antwoord, want 'n mens moet baie sensitief wees as 'n beheerliggaam sit, en miskien as jy as 'n voorsitter optree of in die posisies of die ampte van die beheerliggaam werk, moet jy altyd besef dat jy met mense werk, en daar's altyd verskillende kante of hoeke waaruit 'n probleem aangepak moet word. So baie keer is daar 3 kante aan 'n saak, die verskillende weergawes van die mense betrokke, en dan die regte kant in die waarheid. En is om by daai punt uit te kom wat jy 'n besluit moet neem wat in beste belang van die skool is. Dis nie altyd 'n gewilde besluit nie, en ek dink verhoudingsbestuur binne in die skool is 'n baie moeilike ding om te doen, en dit was waarskynlik een van my moeilikste goed om te hanteer by al die skole waar ek al op 'n beheerliggaam gedien het. Dit is maar inherent aan die menslike wil ek amper sê natuur, en hulle gedrag is maar altyd, waar 'n mens is maar moeilikheid. En eintlik moet die beheerliggaam baie keer daai prosesse ook 'n bietjie streamline, om dit nou maar so te stel, om dit te verbeter. Maar dit is baie belangrik om die heeltyd saam met die hoof te werk, en nie die hoof se wil ek amper sê sy reputasie of die hoof se gesag te ondermyn nie. En dis baie keer wat baie vinnig kan gebeur. So mens kan eintlik nie genoeg die situasie beklemtoon waar 'n beheerliggaam en die hoof 'n baie sterk band moet vorm so gou as moontlik, om dan in staat te wees om besluite in belang van die skool te neem nie. Ek wil net teruggaan, en ek wil daarmee ook afsluit. Een van die belangrikste aspekte wat ek weer dink, en jy kan miskien daarop kommentaar lewer, is die aanstel van personeel by 'n skool, nê. Want dit is waar die beheerliggaam 'n baie belangrike rol het om te vervul. Hoewel hulle nie die in terme van die departement die aanstelling maak nie, moet hulle 'n aanbeveling maak waar 'n spesifieke proses gevolg moet word, waar jy eintlik die beste moontlike onderwyser of kandidaat vir 'n spesifieke posisie moet aanstel, om seker te maak dat die kwaliteit onderrig in die klas plaasvind. En daar het beheerliggame 'n baie belangrike rol om te speel. En miskien kan jy daaroor net so vinniger praat voor ons dalk afsluit op hierdie gesprek.
I think when we do finish off, let's just talk about why people would stand on a governing body. As I said, we are on the eve of elections. In March, we've got elections. So let's just chat about why we suggest to people, because a lot of people said to me, why would you stand on a governing body? And when I was on a governing body, why would you deal with all this stuff that happens? And we'll talk about that stuff there. But going back to your question on appointment processes, I think it's vitally important that governing bodies understand their role. Every appointment in the school, the governing body needs to be involved in. As I said before, they don't have to hire and fire, but they need to be involved because they can bring an understanding that possibly the principal or other management team don't have. Secondly, they can also co-op members. So if they need to co-op members and they feel they don't have the expertise, the governing body has got the authority to co-op people that have got expertise. And dare I say it, every town has got an HR specialist in their town. So there's no reason, or maybe I should say every parent body has got an HR person in their parent body that they can lean on to give them support. So I think that's vitally important. We have always said that the outcome of education depends on the educator in front of the children, and I think you need to take those steps very carefully. It's far easier to hire than it is to fire, and I've spent hours and hours on governing bodies sitting in appointment processes, and then on the flip side, I also spent a lot of time on exit interviews, which I also think is very useful. But the appointment process is vital, and I think that's where governing bodies need to understand, and let's be honest with each other, that's probably a lot of time that's taken up. But if you structure it and you manage it properly, you can do it. And it's so rewarding to see the right educators growing in a school, especially when you take those little chances and appoint someone who's a very young educator, is fully qualified but no experience, and you think, what are we going to do here? And you see that educator actually blossom and grow into a wonderful educator. That's a reward in itself. And you know then, through your action, as small as it might be, no one's going to give you accolades for it. No one's going to say, well done on that appointment. but you know in your heart that you've actually done well for that school, and that's really important. I think that's critical. But let's go back to why should people serve on a governing body? Because I've had a number of people come to me, saddle up on the side of the sports field, and say, "What about this?" and sort this out. And so I always say it's a messy, vibrant, exciting world, and that's why I like to be involved in it. And you can manage your time in it. My answer to that is that you can give back to your community. Being on a governing body to me is the second best thing to being a teacher. I think if I had life again, I'd probably be a teacher. But I think there you can give back to the community. You can actually help development. But your answer to that, why should someone serve on a governing body? If Joseph walks down the street tomorrow and says, "Constanze, I've been asked to serve on a governing body," what's your answer? What do you tell them?
Ek dink ook liefde vir kinders, liefde vir ons skole, liefde vir ons land, net om 'n mens te wees. En as jy 'n ouer is en jy weet wat jy die beste vir jou kind wil hê, waar's die beste plek om dit te gaan uitleef by die skool, waar jy regtig ander mense kan help om beter te word, prosesse kan verbeter, jou skool te verbeter, maar vir elke kind sterre in hulle oë te gee. Ek glo kinders moet sterre in hulle oë hê, en ons het daai absolute verantwoordelikheid as ouers om dit verder te vat. Dit bly nie net in jou ouerhuis nie, dit gaan 'n bietjie verder. So as jy tyd het, en as jy lief is vir kinders, en as jy lief is vir leef, gaan dien jou skool, want ons skole in ons land het ons nodig. Nee, baie dankie, ek dink dit was 'n lekker gesprek. Goeie wenke vir ons ouers. Ons hoop ons sien julle daar by die beheerliggaam verkiesings. Kom na vore, kom staan vir 'n beheerliggaamslid, kom dien jou skool, kom help jou skool, en kom stem ten minste. Kom maak die verskil daar in jou gemeenskap, sodat ons land se skole, ons kinders en ons skole kan vorentoe gaan. Baie dankie.
Yeah, thanks very much. And if I can encourage you to get involved in your governing bodies, get involved for your children's sake, get involved for your school's sake, and get involved for your community's sake. Get involved by either standing for your governing body or at the very least voting for your governing body that's standing for your school.